So let me just start with some context. Robotics is now a hot discipline, but there's a lot of emphasis in autonomy. It's gaining interest not just from academics, but also from government agencies, and particularly from industry. And we're just getting started. So one question is, what new things should we be thinking about as we go down the pike? And it's not too hard to see that the drivers are still the same drivers that were there about 5 years ago. One, this extraordinary increase in computational resources that are available to us, even after Moore's law. Second, the fact that it's getting exceedingly easy to collect data and store data and then to mine that data. All projections are that there will be 40 times 10 to the 21 bytes of data in the cloud in the next 5 years. And then lastly, communication. Whether you look at 3G, 4G, 5G, or whatever, or Wi-Fi or broadband, again, in the next 5 years, you can expect the bandwidth to double and the cost to decrease by roughly 33%. So what does that mean for robotics? Well, there are two things that are driving AI and autonomy. One is data science, the fact that data is available and computation is available. And second is network science, the fact that people and machines and computers can communicate at extraordinary rates with extraordinary precision. And that is going to change robotics, so as we think about robotics and autonomy. So really some of the drivers, because of these three the technologies, that is computation, data, and bandwidth, allows us to think now about network autonomy, and that's really what this workshop is all about. Think about self-driving cars, think about logistics support, whether you think about trucks, drones. So if Amazon has its way around Christmas season in a city block, you might have about 1,000 drones delivering packages. Manufacturing, the same thing. I think network machines, network people. I think agriculture in the next 5 years is going to have a renaissance with lots of autonomy as the fraction of people worldwide engaged in agriculture is decreasing. And I think the most interesting impact is on energy. So if you've been looking at the cost of renewables, it's been dropping about 75% over 5 years. Improvements in storage technology, cost of lithium batteries dropping. Electric cars becoming a reality, the sharing economy. If you add autonomy to it, you can actually think about a world without fossil fuels in the next 5 years. And that is going to change the way we think about lots and lots of infrastructure things. So Los Angeles, 60% of Los Angeles right now is covered by parking lots and roads. And how those are architected in the future will really depend on all of these technologies. And I think autonomy to me is a key piece. If autonomy is enabled, the number of cars that are used, the usage of cars will drop to about 10% of where it is today. So in that context, we want to think about what new advances we should try to foster over the next 5 years. Clearly, there's a large community in robotics that thinks about how multiple agents interact with each other, interact with humans. We all think about how to coordinate machines, how to get robots to cooperate, how to get robots to collaborate, and to continue this alliteration. There are three other words that start with C: competition, cohesion, coalition. And we know how to think about all of these things. But this workshop is really more about when things go wrong. In particular, while we do think about failures, it's in the context of robustness. How do you get individual robots to be more robust, machines to be robust, networks to be more robust? We probably don't think about as much as about non-cooperative players as we probably should, and we certainly don't think about adversaries. We also want to think about things going really, really wrong. And there's a great book by Judith Rodin called The Resilience Dividend. She was the president of the Rockefeller Foundation. And she points out that we spent over $4 trillion over the last 4 years, 4 decades, just fighting natural disasters. And if you look at this book, and really it talks about everything from Katrina to the tsunami in Fukushima, wildfires, all kinds of things that we could have actually done a better job of engineering infrastructures to protect ourselves against. The book talks about structural networks, social networks, and natural networks. So structure obviously refers to infrastructure. We all know about social networks, and the natural networks are more because of geographical underpinnings of where we live, and that influences who we interact with. So questions of self-awareness, how to make individual nodes self-aware, how to make them self-regulate and adapt, and integration, the question of integrating across the networks. So for example, if you look at any one of these disasters, there's a cost associated with the disaster, but we don't take into account the cost associated with the healthcare network that is stressed by every one of these disasters. Even if you go back to the financial crisis, the cost of the financial crisis in 2008 can be quantified, but many experts estimate that the real cost was twice that because of the stress to the healthcare network and the unemployment that followed because of that. So how to make networks, how to create networks that are more integrated, and how to incorporate diversity in the networks to make the networks themselves more resilient. So resiliency is an important theme in the book, and it's, I think, something we should think about as we think about networks of machines and humans. And resiliency is a natural focal point along many axes. So first, attacks on individuals, and these may be deliberate attacks or natural attacks, and attacks on infrastructure. Certainly, malicious adversaries is something we want to think about. And what happens when entire networks get disrupted? So clearly, if you want to make something very resilient, you want to have all kinds of communication across nodes, but what if the communication network itself breaks down? Clearly, there's an entire community thinking about security, and that's not something we want to per se think about. There's cyber security, cyber physical system security, and there are programs across NSF, DARPA, and other funding agencies that think a lot about security issues. But resilience is something that cuts across. It's along a different axis. And hopefully we can focus on that as opposed to thinking about ways in which individuals are compromised. But we felt we should be thinking about privacy. So anytime you force information to be exchanged across nodes in order to enable resiliency, you have to think about privacy. And the question is, the mechanisms that we institute to make things resilient, are they violating any social norms for privacy? And what are those social norms? So networked autonomous systems, beyond robustness of robots, beyond coordination, cooperation, collaboration, all the C words we think about, we want to think about heterogeneity and diversity along, again, many axes: behavioral, functional, morphological, temporal, spatial, and ultimately the resilience of the networks themselves. And I said before, information sharing and privacy. So these are hopefully some of the key issues we want to hit upon in this workshop. And our goal here is really to bring people from different backgrounds to bring their thoughts to bear on this topic. I say this in jest, we don't normally see each other at a particular conference, and we do see each other, but maybe not in this particular context. So it's an interesting group of people, and my hope is that through short talks and through discussions at the end of short talks, we might think about what new intellectual threads we want to emphasize going forward, which will impact potentially new federal initiatives. So we're not asking for papers or anything like that to compile proceedings, but we thought it would be a good idea to have video proceedings that we could then use to publicize the results of this workshop. And as ideas mature, we might think about a Springer book that captures some of the key ideas. So we'll come back to this to the end. These are just discussion points for how we might try to move this agenda forward. So that's really it. So logistics, I know you all received email about instructions online for how to get the reimbursements. Do we have copies of?
I'll send emails. It's a lot of paperwork.
Yeah.
We'll get it done.
So if there are any questions, Amanda has been taking care of this. And then finally we have We have dinner not near, it's a nice restaurant nearby. So the dinner is on the workshop committee, not drinks, but we'll figure out a way to manage that. So and it's right across, so we'll walk over together at around 6:30 this evening. Right, 6:30 is when we try to coordinate and get everybody together and we get down to 7. So that's really it from my end. I do want to thank, so Amanda is here, Amanda Kowak. Unfortunately, Brian Sadler had a medical emergency in his family, and he could not be here. But Brett is here. I want to thank ARL for sponsoring this workshop, and also ask Brett if he could say a few words to welcome everyone and to give an ARL perspective. Thank you. By the way, these proceedings are being recorded, so if you speak, do use a microphone, and there's a video camera there, and you should have a consent form, hopefully that everybody is signed. And if you feel uncomfortable about putting your video online, that's fine. You don't have to sign it, and we'll turn off the recorder. Thanks, Rick.
Thanks, Vijay. So I'll keep my comments short so we can get to the real fun stuff of the talks. But I just want to, first of all, thank Vijay and Amanda and Brian, who unfortunately couldn't be here. They were the real drivers behind the workshop and put this together. So I really appreciate the efforts that you guys put together for that. And then also welcome all of you. Really looking forward to interacting with all of you over the next 2 days, and also this evening, hopefully, to do that. This is the second workshop we've had kind of in this topic here. We had another one in December. A few of you in the audience were at that one. So this is another kind of push in this area. I think it emphasizes the interest we have in ARL within the Army in this topic area. If you look at the DoD and a lot of things, you talk to you about the third offset, what's the next third offset technology, and pretty much anytime you hear people talking about that, they're talking about intelligence systems and how intelligence systems play in that. When we think about it, we realize that we have a lot of advancements going on in the U.S., but they're also advancing along those lines everywhere in the world. So where can we take advantage? We really think it's really how do we get heterogeneous systems to work together? How do we get a large number of systems integrated with soldiers, integrated in teams? How do we get those to work together? How do we get them to work very resilient behaviors? How do we deal with loss from many different factors? How do we deal with loss of networks, loss of systems, and so forth? And basically a peer level adversary from a DoD perspective, which I think applies across to many commercial applications as well. So how do we make more systems more robust? How do we make them interface better with humans to more fluid the human environment and more seamlessly? So that's all I'm going to say for initial introduction. Just thanks for coming. Looking forward to the meeting and basically throughout the days.
Very good. Thank you.